we're talking here is something that begins in the body, the adrenal dump, the fight or flight reflex, if you will, that manifests itself in the mind and the mind's perception of what's going on around you. You can expect, because it happens to the great majority, though of course nothing's 100%, the tachypsychia effect, spelled T-A-C-H-Y-P-S-Y-C-H-I-A, the most commonly misspelled and misused term probably in the business. It's not an overall term for everything that happens to you, including the tunnel vision, etc. The tachypsychia refers to one specific phenomenon, the distortion of perceived time. Probably any of your listeners who have been in a car crash, a violent encounter, seeing the baby starting to fall from the high chair can recall experiencing that in slow motion. The term tachypsychia comes from the Greek. It means literally the speed of the mind. And you would think at first some of the psychologists wrote in and said, well, why don't you call it bradypsychia, because brady is the prefix that means slow. The reason is that the original term is in fact accurate. I did not coin it. It's a medical term. It was given to me by Dr. Glenn Dalrymple of Little Rock. The thing that's happening is that as the fight or flight reflex begins, the primal survival instinct is channeling all the mind's powers toward the singly focused task of survival. We normally use perhaps the 10% tip of the iceberg of the conscious mind, and when suddenly, many times that degree of mental power is brought to bear on a single focus, it creates almost the illusion that it's as if you've been watching life through a Kodak camera and suddenly someone put on a motor drive. So many more things are being rapidly processed by the mind, so many more perceptions are being realized so quickly that it creates the illusion that everything's happening in slow motion. We warn our people about that because first, some of the people who felt it said that it terrified them to feel that they were being slowed down, like they were moving through jello, like someone in a nightmare.
Or like you're in a dream, yeah. You go slowly.
Yeah, you see the same thing in a dream state. And we remind them that, look, things aren't slowing down. You're probably moving faster than you ever did in your life, and so is the other SOB. You don't have all that much extra time to take here. We warn them about that also because if there's been a video camera going in the bank during the shooting, and someone asks you, gee, Lenny, how long did the shooting take? And you say, oh, God, a minute, 2 minutes. And the video camera shows 8 seconds. You're proven to be a liar. And from that point on, your credibility in this case is gone. We tell our students, do not answer, respectfully decline to answer any specific questions as to how long did it take, how many feet and inches was the person away from you, exactly at what point on the compass was he coming from, exactly how many shots were fired, because your perceptions will be so distorted by the danger, so distorted by the near-death experience, because remember, you were the victim, that you would be literally the worst possible witness. It ill serves the truth of the investigation to peg the decisions on what the victim perceived at the moment the victim had to fire in self-defense.
So here you are, someone's got a gun pointed at you. You hear a lot of times that you're going to revert to your training. Does that seem to hold true?
If there is anything that all of us in the business agree with, and you'll have some who say use a gross motor movement for this, and others will say no, you can use a complex psychomotor skill for this. Some will say shooting on isosceles, and others will say a weaver. Some will say revolver, some will say automatic, 357, 45. What none of us argue is that under stress you'll become a creature of your preconditioning, a creature of habit, a creature of training. It's not, frankly, just the training that does it. If you were trained properly but reverted to a bad habit and kept doing the bad habit will come to the fore. It will be as if the mind goes on automatic pilot. It will seek an autonomic response. If you have inculcated the appropriate autonomic response, if you have drilled and trained, and the general rule among the physiologists is a complex psychomotor skill, that is, where many subtle things must be done at once exactly right. And shooting most certainly is a complex psychomotor skill. That it takes approximately 3,000 repetitions to create that autonomic response, unconscious competence, if you will, function on automatic pilot. whether that's necessary for all of it, I would have to argue. I've talked to too many men who said they were in a dangerous job or living in a dangerous neighborhood. They had foreseen themselves one day being in a violent encounter and had made to themselves the commitment, if I'm shot, I'm not going to go down. If I'm stabbed, I'm not going to fall. If I'm hurt, I'll keep fighting. Now, it's kind of hard to do 3,000 repetitions of that. But when the first time it happened, the psychological suggestion had been so powerful, the plan in place had been so strong. The determination, the human will, that given stimulus A, I will perform response A, it worked. And every single one of the ones who had that in their mind, unless they had in fact received a physically debilitating and crippling wound, were able to respond. And of the ones who told me, well, there was the shot, I fell back, I thought I was going to die, oh my God, that these almost invariably were the people who had never actually thought it would happen to them, had never planned for this kind of a crisis. It's sort of like, really, I guess, any human emergency. When you see you're at a beach and someone collapses with a heart attack. Okay, the person who could never confront their own mortality is going to stand here quivering and screaming, and someone's just going to have to push them out of the way. And the person who's trained in cardiopulmonary resuscitation will automatically move them in a position, clear an airway, start the breathing, go into the right rhythm. And that is a function of the response that they intentionally brought into place. I've never yet met a person who has performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation who was ever able to actually count the compressions versus the breaths. It was just the body went into that learned repetition that had been learned on the dummy resuscitation. And really that, I think, distinguishes training from education. Our programs encompass both. Education is knowledge. And when I go into this next classroom here with a video, watching video right now, and I share with them, all right, these are the patterns of encounter. Okay, these are some of the tactics we're seeing used among the armed robbers, the muggers, da-da-da-da-da. That's education, that's knowledge, one more tactic to put in the bank. When we take them out on the range, when we drill them with the deactivated guns and the heavily gloved hands on the weapon retention and disarming, no matter how the man grabs your gun, this is the movement that brings it back. Those constant drills, those repetitions that will create that autonomic response are training. Training, distinct from education, is a physically programmed response. And I believe that the discipline known as officer survival encompasses both.
Let's go ahead and talk about weapons, the gun in particular, and then a little about ammunition. But first, the controversy of 9mm 45, 10mm 41, I mean, it's going on and on. What's the best gun for a street combat shooting situation?
First, it's one that's street proven, and that lets out at this time the 10mm, and particularly the 10mm light and the 40 caliber. They have excellent ballistic potential, but at the time of this interview, there is no recorded shooting with the 40 Smith & Wesson, no recorded shooting with the 950 or 1,000-foot-second FBI load. Of the 5 we've been able to access with the full-power 10mm, 2 or 3 were dismal, and a couple of them were mediocre at best. It appears that the current emphasis on deep penetration has resulted in a bullet that projects its energy over a very long and a very narrow cone. You can take a heavy bodybuilder, and if you're shooting front to back in a defensive situation where he's in an aggressive posture, a bullet that will penetrate 18 or 24 inches of flesh simulant is by definition going to expend a good part of its energy and a good part of its destructive force outside the body you're trying to incapacitate. I would frankly rather carry a 9mm than a 10mm simply because I know what the bullet will do. There are a great many 9mm loads that justify its reputation as an impotent man-stopper. There are also a handful of 9mm loads that are extremely effective and are street-proven. In the standard stuff you can buy over the counter, the Federal 9BP, 115-grain hollow point, we just don't find any of the cases we find with other brands and other bullet designs where the guy has taken 12, 13, 14 rounds and stayed on his feet up and running.